All right, let's kick it off with stand up. How are we feeling about Netflix? What did we learn yesterday? What are we feeling good about? What are we not feeling good about? Probably more importantly, where are we at?
The nav bar,
Yep. What about the nav bar?
learning how to incorporate everything that goes on it into it. Still a lot that I am trying to understand of it, but just having it, just learning how to use it properly, just installing it properly on your screen. That's pretty much.
Yeah, kind of interesting, right? As engineers, we practice breaking things down, right? And so when we look at that entire page, we're like, we're never going to be able to build that. And so we break it down and we go, all right, let's start the very top. Let's start the top left, right, and work our way across, and then we work our way down. And then even that, looking at the nav bar alone, you could look at that and be like, all right, I still have no idea how to build that, right?
Yeah.
And so breaking it down even one step further and going, I got to get the image to show up. All right, now that I got the image to show up, I got to get the links to show up. Once I get the links to show up, now I got to get the icons to show up. So right when you get that to that point where you're thinking there's no more HTML for me to learn, all I need to do is practice. We're going to rip the HTML rug out from under you and we're going to move on to JavaScript, right? And that's going to happen time and time again throughout the program as we move on to each module. But the good news is none of this goes away. So we can't learn JavaScript in a vacuum. We need something that our JavaScript interacts with. That's going to be our HTML, right? So as you're going through this, keep in mind that all of the projects are very intentionally ordered for you to get more and more practice with the concepts that we're learning, and then just exposing you to one more new concept each project that we go, right? So this Netflix project, we're seeing icons for the first time. Tonight, we're going to get into Google Fonts and we're going to see how we can install a different font and style things that way. So as we progress through the project, new concepts are definitely going to come out of the woodwork. What else kind of connected last night? Any light bulb moments? Any concepts that we're still struggling with? How are we feeling?
Learned about some kind of the default classes in for all the elements in HTML and uh, differences between specific selectors and um, kind of just the broad single word selectors that you can be have multiple modifiers in.
Yeah, so we started with, targeting the body, right? And the body is the second broadest element on the entire page, right? HTML is something that you can technically target, but body is usually the better choice. But anyway, we got our HTML, which is like or our body selector. And then as we progressed, we started getting more and more specific. So we started going into, well, I don't want to target all of the spans. I only want to target the spans in the nav bar. And so when you think about the term selector, that is literally what it is doing. It is CSS selecting a piece of your HTML. And sometimes it's easier to just throw an ID in or a class in and make a new selector. Other times it makes more sense to say, hey, the parent already has a selector, and we want to apply this to all of the elements inside that ID or class that we've already added. So, what you will find in CSS is there are 19 different ways of doing things, and some ways are better than others, right? We don't want to just target a span because that could accidentally apply to every span on the website. But as you progress, you'll start seeing more and more CSS and start going, oh, that's a different way of doing it. I didn't think of it that way. So some ways are better and some ways are just the same, right? And either one will work. There are times that we can use margin and padding interchangeably. There are also times that we go to use padding and realize that we should have used margin instead. So a lot of that is also just trial and error, which is why I showed the CSS Giphy yesterday of using the blinds, right? Sometimes you just got to play around with it a little bit, pull the cord, change the wand, right? See what it's adjusting and get your blinds working just the way you want. The same goes for your CSS. So when I pick these numbers out of the air, it is because I've done this project so many times and that I have the experience to know, hey, I think 15 pixels of padding is going to look right there. But that's not something that you'll know right out of the gate. And that's something that you'll play around with and go, oh, I like a little bit more padding or a little bit less padding, and learn that over time. Is there anything else from yesterday that's resonating or that we should go back over before we dive into today?
I had a question just about like general practice for web development.
Yeah.
So the steps that are usually taken is, you do your wireframe, mock-up, prototype, and then when you get into the actual code of it, you're going through the entire layout and then styling and then functionality? Are you doing it on like individual pieces, the whole project? Like,
Yeah, it can
is
really
it differ?
It does. It definitely does differ. And it depends if you're working in a team or not, and it depends if you're inheriting a project or not, right? So, I would say maybe not the vast majority, but definitely the majority of the time, when you're starting out a company, the company's not coming to you, hiring you as the first developer, especially being more entry or junior level, and saying, hey, this is the app we need. Please build it from scratch. Here's a list of requirements. 9 times out of 10, when you're getting hired, as a junior developer, at least, you're getting handed some code that was already working. And if you're lucky, the developer who built that code is still accessible and you can still ask questions of, but they're going to ask you to add in additional pages or additional features or integrate more APIs or fix a bug that might be happening. So oftentimes you don't start from scratch, right? You're not starting from a wireframe, or if you are, it's adding a wireframe and mockup on into an already existing app or an already existing wireframe. You're just adding on to it. So it really does depend. Some companies you come into and they say, we start you out as a front end developer. And as you get more practice with that, as feel more experienced working in our code base, you can move into a full stack position. Some companies will say, we don't hire front end developers, we only hire full stack developers. So it really, really depends. One question that I really like to ask in an interview is like, what does my 9 to 5 look like, right? What does the typical day look like of a position or of a person in this position or job title? Because they may come back to you and say, well, you spend 6.5 hours a day in meetings and you have a little bit of time to code. Sign of a terribly run company, right? If you're spending more than a third of your day in meetings, that's concerning. So it's really good to ask that, right? Of like, all right, what's a 9 to 5 look like on an average day? And then also, what's my week look like? You would be surprised the number of companies that know they have to hire people because they are short-staffed, invest a lot of hours into the hiring process, hire you, you come in on the first day and they're like, I'm so busy, I don't even know what to give you. And you're like, well, you're just paying me a lot an hour and I'm here. What do you want me to do? And they're like, I don't know. Hiring was so exhausting. I didn't even think about what to give you. So those are all great questions to ask in a job interview, right? Of what would my first project be? What tech skills would I be using? What languages? Oftentimes you'll have to learn a new language and that will be expected on the job, right? It's not expected for you to be a master of whatever tech stack they're using. So oftentimes the first couple weeks at a company are just going through tutorials like Free Code Camp or YouTube or Udemy or something like that, where you're getting more comfortable with not only that language, but then slowly starting to explore the existing code so that when they do give you a task, you're more equipped to do it. So I don't want to say that there is a cut and dry, you always do wireframe first, then you always do mockup, and then you always do file set up, and then you always write. There are certain things that it does make sense to do, but it really does depend on the job title, how prepared they are, how prepared you are for their exact tech stack. And then also how rigid they are with the software development lifecycle, right? Because every project does some version of the SDLC that we talked about in week 1, right? But that doesn't mean that every company is following it to a T right out of the textbook, right? So learning that is all about company culture, how many steps of that they follow, and then identifying kind of where they are in that process. Sorry, very, very long answer for a very over summarized, it all depends.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Anything? Oh yeah, go ahead, Terry.
we also learned the benefits of Prettier, how Prettier go automatically like fix your coding and stuff, but also be aware of if you like missing like something in your code, then it won't fix it.
Exactly. Yeah. And prettier is something that give it a couple days before you make a judgment on it, right? Some people hate it and turn it off. That is okay. Some people really love it and learn to live with it not doing maybe exactly what they want, or putting some things up on a different line just to have it all on a standard. So that's something that give it a couple days, give it this week to see if you like it or you hate it. I have found the majority of students do like it because it lets you detect errors sooner. As soon as you see that red in the bottom right of your screen, you're like, "Ooh, I gotta fix that," right? I didn't even know something was broken, but because Prettier isn't working, I'm not going to keep going. I gotta figure out why it's not working. And because because you know that earlier, it does make it much easier to find the problem and solve it. But Prettier is not all cakes and rainbows, right? There are certain things that it will style differently. It will sometimes move your comments around in a position that you don't want it to. And so that there are pros and cons to Prettier. I wouldn't work on a team without Prettier. I run all of my code through Prettier. I require all of the developers working under me to run all of my code through Prettier. But that's a company culture thing, right? That's something that we have decided together that Prettier is a better way to manage our code, and that's why we do it. So it is not the only way to write code, but just like any tool, it is up to you to decide whether or not it is helping more than it is hurting.
And I also got a question. So I was playing around last night with CSS, and I noticed one of the properties, I think it was called justified. I don't know how to like, I was trying to experiment with it a bit. Can you like explain like what it like kind of does a bit?
Yeah, so we're gonna go back to kind of in our tweaking round. Once we get the rest of the site done, we're going to go back and make a pass and kind of do little cleanup stuff where we'll make the links up at the top when you hover on them change to a different color. We're going to modify the size of the text a little bit. We're going to go back through and tweak some padding. But the one thing we're going to do is when the human eye, just like the human brain is trained to recognize faces, the human eye actually does a really good job of detecting when something is in alignment or when it is centered. And so as developers, we're constantly working with layout, right? Where that image might be a little bit taller, and we want the links to be centered in the image, not necessarily at the top of where that div is. So justify content and align items are two Flexbox properties that Bootstrap gives us access to through classes, so we don't need to work with Bootstrap directly. And the whole Bootstrap grid is built using Flexbox to get alignment right. And so when we go back through and do our cleanup pass, we're going to go see that the text is aligned to the top left, and we don't want it aligned to the top left. We want it aligned in the center of the div. So we're going to go through and do a cleanup pass and start playing around with justifying content, aligning items, understanding where the parent is, and really dialing that in. Even though it may only be a couple pixels, we will definitely do a pass where we start playing with alignment and seeing how we can clean up the design using that. Any other questions or comments from yesterday's class?
Yeah, I did have one.
Yeah.
So the image libraries or things that we're including in there, is that always going to need to be sort of included in generally making a large file, or are we going to start like doing absolute references to places in the internet stuff on for the like the background image and stuff like that?
So you definitely can reference images out on the internet. The only concern that when you start doing that is if the hosting changes, if they remove that image. There are also some like Unsplash makes it very clear that they don't want you to point your code at their hosting because they have to pay for that bandwidth, right? And so the vast majority of the time when we are developing websites, it is preferred to download that image and reference that in a place that we host it and control it. However, that's not to say that you can't use remote URLs and go out and use something on the internet. There's nothing wrong with that other than the fact that they're the ones in control of that image, basically. There is no requirement to put it in the IMG folder. Some people call that static. Some people don't use a folder at all and just have their JPEGs in the root. So how you organize your files is something that we will experience over the whole cohort. And then as you start seeing other developers' code, you'll see some similarities and some differences. So the way you organize your code, the way you reference those files is basically whatever works is totally fine. But there are kind of best practices in terms of not referencing someone else's image that's hosted on their website. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
That and more, yeah, because it was the
Okay. Anything else lingering?
Well, I mean, it's not really pertaining to what we did yesterday, but so I don't know, you might notice it or not, but like some people use like a thing called the Wayback Machine. I'm trying to see like how that even like possible, like visiting like older like websites and stuff. If you might know, I don't know if you do or not.
Yeah, so Wayback Machine is actually it is taking snapshots all the way back to that time. And so there's no way that it can retroactively go back and see those websites in time without it saying, all right, in 2005, we visited the website and stored a copy of it. And so that's how the Wayback Machine works, is that it isn't like it's able to go back in any point in time. It is actually set up to visit the largest websites on the internet and store a copy of them so that when we want to go back in time to see it, we're able to go back to specific snapshots that they have taken back at those timestamps.
How much space does that take up? Is that like zettabytes?
It is less than you think because it's all just text.
Well, can't you access YouTube on the Wayback Machine?
You can, but it's not the entire YouTube database. It's only the user interface.
I see. Okay.
So like you wouldn't like interact like the website one just interact, it would just be like nothing but like text and like CSS kind of.
Yeah, so like the Wayback Machine may take a snapshot of what the homepage looks like, but it's not like you can go to YouTube in 2010 in the Wayback Machine and do a search for a video and access the database as it was in 2010. The Wayback Machine is meant more to be for seeing the HTML as it was at that time, and less meant to be interactive. There are certainly limits to the Wayback Machine, yes. Okay, with all of that said, let's go ahead and dive in. Today may be the first day that we are working on the same project as yesterday. So I find it's much easier to duplicate files and folders inside Finder instead of VS Code. So we are going to go ahead and open up Finder, or you can pop open your My Code from the desktop, which will open Finder. I'm going to go to my desktop, to my code, to my week 3. And on my day 1, I'm going to right click on that and hit make, I'm going to say duplicate. And that will duplicate it and call it day 1 copy. I'm going to rename that. You get to rename by single clicking on that file. And then if you don't get the text selection highlight, hit the enter key once, and that will get you into rename. And I'm going to rename that to day 2. Now, it's important to mention here that if you were working on a professional project, you wouldn't be duplicating this every single day. The only reason we do this in class is so that you can see the day over day progress, so that when you're reviewing this project, it's not overwhelming to only just see the finished version of this. As we progress throughout the curriculum, you guys are going to learn Git, G-I-T, which is a version control system that is used pretty much industry-wide to keep track of changes to your code and basically collaboration on a code file. However, because we're just getting started here, we're duplicating out this code so that you can see the day over day progress without getting lost with just the final version of all of that. With all of that said, was anyone not following along yesterday and would like to follow along today and would like a copy of my code instead of working with yours? Okie doke. So right click on day 1, go down to duplicate, rename day 1 copy to day 2. Take your day 2, go ahead and drag and drop that right into VS Code. If you do have your day 1 open, go ahead and close that, because it's very easy to accidentally be in the wrong day and then realize it too late and make it a pain to clean it up. So if you have day 1 still open, go ahead and close that. I am then going to start a live share and drop that in the Zoom meeting chat. And then I am working in my index.html. I am going to go ahead and get my go live working so I can see that. This is where we left off. And my live server is shared, so we are good to go. I'm going to pop open my style.css and my index.html, put my style down at the bottom. And then the last thing I'm going to do is pull up the reference website that we're working with, and that is also in chat. Everyone good to go? Anyone need another minute? Okie doke. Thank you guys for all having your camera on. As the cohort progresses, I know it's tempting to have it off, but being able to see all of your faces means I know when one of you are panicked or need some additional help or have some questions. So appreciate you all having your cameras on. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in here. We've got some additional work to do. We've got the word Bridgerton showing up. But we've got some work to do for the rest of this content over here. So we're going to work through that. We're going to get our thing showing up over here, and then we can play around with fonts for the first time. So, you know what? Actually, let's start with fonts, because I think that that's more fun than building out the rest of this content. So we actually saw fonts for the first time. We don't think of it as a font. And that's this material symbols outlined. That's how we got our icons working for the first time. But you see that this comes from this website, fonts.googleapis.com. Well, it turns out that there are only about 10 fonts that you're allowed to use on the internet. And those 10 fonts are guaranteed or almost guaranteed to be installed in every browser. How do you get that list? Well, if you just Google web-safe fonts, the first link should be W3 Schools, and here are the fonts that W3 Schools says you are allowed to use this pretty much anywhere in any browser, and it will be guaranteed to work without any additional work. Okay, that's cool. That's also pretty limiting because I know we've all been on a website where they didn't use one of these fonts and the fonts worked fine. Well, the problem with fonts is every browser uses a slightly different font file standard. TTF, OTF, or WOFF, WOFF2. They're all of these different font standards, right? Of how do I make an A look like an A? Well, there are these different standards that make it really hard. So we can't just drop a link in and say, hey, this is the font file that we want to use. And so Google, about 10 years ago, said this is really dumb. If you want to use a new font, you shouldn't have to convert it into 6 different files to make it work across all of these browsers. And the other major problem with fonts is fonts are technically artwork. They are copyrightable, and because of that, they also have licenses with them. So out of these web-safe fonts, they're totally fine to use, no problem, don't have to install anything. But if we find another font that we really like that we want to use, we may buy that font or have the right to use that font for free for personal use, but we can't use it for commercial use. What do we mean for commercial use? If I go out and buy this font or use this font and am using it on a website that I then sell to a client, I may be breaking the license of that font that I bought. So in order to get around all of this, the incompatibility issues, the file format issues, and the licensing issues, Google said, well, we're a multi-billion-dollar, I think trillion-dollar company. We can fix this. And so what they did is they came out with Google Fonts. So if you go ahead and open up a new tab, you can head to fonts.google.com or do a search for Google Fonts and click on it. And let me make sure I'm getting the same version of the site that you guys get. This is the Google Fonts website, and it looks kind of boring, but what it's showing you is 1,600 and some fonts that you are able to use. And so Roboto is one of their most common ones. Roboto and Open Sans are used in the Android operating system and the UI library that they call Material UI or Material Design. Roboto and Open Sans are here, but you can see there are a ton of options here. And if this is a little overwhelming, what you can do is click into the filters. And this is really cool because you can kind of play around with what you're previewing. So I want to find the right font for the word Bridgerton. So I'm going to type in Bridgerton. And then I can come down here and start filtering through some things. So I could say, hey, I want to see what this looks like in a handwriting font. And I can come through and go, all right, all of these are pretty cool. Or I can take off handwriting and I can say, all right, I wonder what the difference is between a serif and a sans serif. And the serif or sans serif just means the letters have basically little tails on the edges of them. But you can come through here and pick whatever font you would like. So I'm gonna go for this one. So select a font, doesn't matter which one you want to use. I am then going to click on Get Font in the top right. Then I don't want to download it. I don't need it downloaded. All I want to do is use this font. So I'm going to click on Get Embed Code. And that's going to pop open this thing with some code that we can use. So I'm going to take this first one, and it says embed code in the head of your HTML. All right, this is something we've done before with Bootstrap. We did it with the material icon font. Now we are doing it with a Google font. So I'm going to go ahead and hit copy code on this. I'm going to come over to my HTML. I don't want it to go above my style or I do want it to go above my style.css. My style.css should almost always be the last thing that I load in, because that should be the one that overrides any other CSS that I have installed. So I'm going to put this between my Bootstrap link and my other material symbols outlined link. So I'm going to go ahead and paste those in. You can see that this is pretty ugly, but because we have Prettier working, when I save it, it's going to automatically fix all the indentation for us. Now I've saved that. I come back over to my live server and nothing looks different. I'm like, well, where's my pretty handwriting font? Well, we haven't applied it to anything yet. All we did is we installed it. It's kind of like when we install Bootstrap. When we install Bootstrap and have an empty body, there's no way to know if Bootstrap is installed or working or not, because we don't have any content in there. Well, we've got content in here, but it isn't assumed by default that we are going to use that font. So if I go back to my Google Fonts, there is this CSS class that I need to use. However, I'm not going to use all of this, because I don't want to make a class and manually apply it to my things. All I want to do is use this font family. So I'm going to copy that font family line, head back to my code, and figure out where I want to apply that style. I want to apply that style to my show name. I have happened to already have an ID called show name. So I'm going to come down. I'm going to see I'm already using my selector show name. I already have a font size and a couple other CSS properties. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in my font family. And this is the most nerve-wracking part of teaching. You don't know if it works yet until you try it. So I can come over here, and now I've got Bridgerton showing up. I actually really hate that in all caps. So I'm going to take that off uppercase. That looks a lot better to me.
Can you do that one more time, please?
Yep. So over in Google Fonts, I am going to pick whatever font that I would like to use. Let's go for a Friends kind of font. I'm going to click on Get Font up at the top. I am going to hit Get Embed Code. I'm going to copy the code for the head section. I'm going to then go up to my head and paste that in. I happen to put it between my Bootstrap and my material font, my material icon font. Then I came back over here and I grabbed this font family, copied that, and pasted that into my show name right here. And if you're able to do all of that, you should see your font actually work. If your font did not change, raise your hand and I can help you figure it out.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Michael, you want to share your screen? Everyone good? Okay.
I'm still getting it right now.
So one thing to mention here, we won't be using multiple fonts, but if you are using multiple Google fonts, we don't want to copy this section of the head over and over and over again. So if you end up wanting to use an additional font weight or an additional font, this interface will actually allow you to load up multiple fonts. So if I go back to my fonts list and I'm like, ooh, I like this one, and I also like this one down here, you'll see it says 3 font families selected. Now, when I go into this embed code, these 2 first link tags haven't changed, but this link tag down here has. And if you look closely in that URL, you'll see that it says dancing script with the weight of 400, and then it will also say, and the family great vibes and the family permanent marker. So if we do end up using multiple fonts from Google, the first 2 link tags don't change, but we can use one link tag that Google will generate for us with all of our different font families that we can then use. And down here, we just use that font family. Now, you may be noticing in that style.css, we said not only the name of the font, but we also put the word cursive in here. What is that cursive doing? Well, if we take that out, you'll see that nothing changes, right? And we're like, well, then why do we need that? Well, let's see what happens if Google Fonts goes down. I'm going to take this style sheet out. I'm going to comment it out. And now you'll see my font is still in cursive, but it's not the font that I requested. Why is it doing that? Basically, this is what we call a fallback, and CSS does this with a lot of different properties. So if for some reason this font is not installed, or Google Fonts is not serving it up, or if the browser's throwing a fit, or something goes wrong, what CSS will do is it will fall back to using a cursive font style. And you can actually use several of these properties. So you can say, I want to use this font if it's installed, if it's available. If it's not, use Courier new. If not, use Courier. If not, use monospace. And when I save this, you'll see my font has changed to Courier. Courier new and Courier are web safe fonts, and then monospace is the last ditch effort, right? So web browsers going all the way back to like Internet Explorer 2 or 3 even had a serif, a sans serif, and a monospace font installed by default. So just a couple fallbacks. You should never specify one font family, especially if it's not a web safe font. It is a good idea to at least have 2 listed, the font that you want, and then serif, sans serif, or monospace as your fallback. Or you can get multiple levels deep here, and CSS will just work through the list until it finds a font that actually will work. Okay, any questions about fonts?
Quick question.
Yeah.
So I was looking at one of them. I kind of lost where I was at, but there is, when I go to the get embed code.
Yep.
There's like a bunch of different classes. Does it matter which one I pull from? Do I need to use the class or specify a class somewhere?
No, so
For
we
that?
didn't use the class because we already had a selector. So the only part of the CSS that we used was the font family here. The other parts of that class that they generated are font weight and something else
I
that
see.
we don't need to specify.
I see. Okay, so I can just take the font family from any of them.
You can, yes. As long as that font family is part of the family of in the URL up here.
Right. Okay.
And this is kind of cool. I'll show you how this works under the hood. If we pop this open, this is everything that Google Fonts is doing for us. And so Google Fonts is saying, hey, here's this font family, and the source of the URL is this WOFF file. And then you can see that it's got all of these like Unicode ranges in here to make it work in basically specific browsers. I believe this will be slightly different if I open it in, let's see. No, let's try it in Firefox. All the browsers may finally be supporting, yeah, they're all supporting WOFF now. But anyway, this file may change. Google can dynamically generate this to work with different font file types. And you can see that Google is actually hosting this WOFF2 file, which is what actually contains the pixels or the vectors to make every letter drawable. Okay, got a little under the hood there, but we do have our font working. That is the end of the new exciting stuff. Now we go back to getting our content to show up. So next part of the screen is this top 10. It says number 2 in shows today. So let's get that to show up. I need to figure out where my CSS I am, or in my HTML, excuse me. So I'm going to come down and I've got the word series. I've got the Bridgerton section. And I'm going, all right, where do I want this to show up? I want it to show up underneath the show name. So I'm going to say I want it to be in my col with the series and the show name, but I want it to be inside the row of the hero. So I'm going to make a new div. We'll call it, I don't know, trending status, maybe? And in my trending status, I need 2 things. I need my image to show up and then that text as well. So in my images, I have a file, but we need to specify that it is inside the image folder. And then we are going to grab our Netflix top 10 icon. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on that. And then I'm going to throw some text in here that says number 2 TV show in the US today. I save that, I come over here, I look, and I'm like, yee. Okay, it's on the right track, but we need to do some CSS work. So I'm going to head to my CSS. At the bottom of the file, I'm going to target my trending status. And I want the image inside my trending status. And we're going to throw a width on that of 25 pixels. And I'm like, okay, that's looking better. But I also want a little bit of breathing space so this number 2 in TV shows today is not right next to that top 10 icon. So I have 2 options. I could either target the trending status text and put margin on the left of it, or I could target the image and put margin on the right of it. They both accomplish the same thing. No one way is better than the other, but because we're already targeting the image, I'm going to throw some margin on the right of this of 10 pixels. That will move the text over a little bit. And I also am going to use that same trick that I did up here with that text shadow. Except this time, maybe I want the text shadow to be a little less apparent because the title is really what I want to draw you to. So I'm going to target just the entire trending status and throw a shadow on the text. And take a look at that. And that's looking good. It's still a little too blending into the background for me. So let's throw a font weight on there of bold. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to leave it there and let you guys catch up for a second. So the new text, everything that we did in our HTML is all in this div ID trending status. And then you can see the CSS that we tweaked here across these 6-ish lines. And this is the final result that we're going for.
Hey, Max,
Yes.
my little image is not showing right before #2 TV show in the US today.
Check your file name. Does it look identical to mine?
See, image. Nope, I have dot instead of image slash.
That will do it.
All right, thank you.
Anyone need one more minute? You got it. Well, that's interesting. Oh, I can make myself appear. Whoa. I didn't know I could do this. Sorry, I'm playing around with Zoom. I... Stop my share for 1 second. I think I can make myself appear. No, that won't work that way. Okay, never mind. Everyone good? Okay. We are going to continue on here. We've got a paragraph of text, and this is going to expose our first problem. However, I am normally not a fan of copy and paste, but when it is straight up text, we can go ahead and copy this. And before someone says there's a typo, I promise you I am going to fix it. All right, so come down here. As always, we don't want to just create divs willy-nilly. We need to figure out where we're creating the div. We are still all inside of this div class col. This is all in our first column. We want to be outside of the div trending status, but inside our div col. I'm going to click on that. I see that that ends here. So that means my next div is going to be down here. And I'm going to put all of that in a paragraph tag and paste that in.
Can you post that in Zoom chat?
Yeah. And I'm curious if that's actually, is that actually a typo?
It's
I have no idea where that came from.
IBOK.
Yeah, I have no idea where that came from. I was just curious. Okay. I'm going to paste that in, save, come back over to my code, and now I've got a problem. It's spanning the entire width of the screen. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, all right, we got to go back to our design here and figure out what it's supposed to be doing. It's supposed to only get to this section here, so we've got some breathing room between. So in order to fix that, it's going to be as simple as adding in a column width. So I'm going to try a column width of 5 and see what that looks like. And that brings it right in. Now, it's as simple as that, but if you don't really see how that fixed the problem, we can investigate a little further. So you don't have to follow me on this, but I'm going to go to my col 5 that I just used and add a border on this of like 5px solid pink. And if we look, now we can see where our col 5 is. So oftentimes when we're working on websites, the divs are invisible, right? And so they're kind of hard to visualize. But this is the way that the browser is laying it out. So even though we don't put a border around things normally, adding that border can help us debug and figure out, hey, where are these columns actually spacing out? So I'm just going to comment this out for now because we may come back and use that to debug once we get this content done. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm back in here. Everything's looking good so far. I may want to go in and adjust the spacing or the padding on things, but for now we want to say, all right, let's get the majority of the site done, and then we can always go back and focus in on additional things. Okay. Last thing we need to do is get this play button and this more info working. And believe it or not, that may take us all the way up until break to get done. So let's dive into those two little components. Because they're in another row, I am going to make another div. So I'm going to come down after this div, and maybe I'll add a comment in here that says end of show description div. Come down after that div and make a new one. And we'll call this button row. And for the first time, except for maybe the first day of HTML, we're going to make our own button. So that is as simple as making a button. And I'm going to put the word play in there and save and go, la-di-da-di-da, everything's pretty and ew. That is the ugliest button. And by default, that is what HTML gives us. They go, this is a button straight from the late 90s. Here you go. Good luck. Enjoy. And I'm like, well, that looks ugly. I really want to make that kind of match the rest of our design. Our design's got this black and white going on. It's got no gray. We want to clean that button up. So in order to do that, I'm going to throw an ID on this of play. Now I need to do some CSS to make that really shine. So first thing I do, and I always work in the order of what is most visibly apparent, right? So if I look at my ending result, what's the first thing that I notice? The background is white on that play button. So I'm going to target my background and make it white. And spell background right. Okay. Actually, before I move on from that, notice on my background when I spell it wrong, not only do I have a squiggly there, what's the other clue that there's something wrong with that code?
It doesn't change color.
It
Like
doesn't change color. And color is one of those things that's very subtle to us, but our eye can pick it up, right? And so you're never going to get quizzed. Well, if an employer does quiz you on this, you're working for a very bad employer. An employer is never going to come in and say, what does orange text mean in a CSS file in the default theme of VS Code? Get out of here. No one's going to know that. But if you have this file open and I showed you this screenshot and said, hey, what's the orange mean? You could look at this and be like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. This yellowish is all of my selectors. And then you can see my properties are all in blue. My values, if they are numbers, are in green. And my values, if they are text, are in orange. So even if we didn't pick up on that before, when we're looking at this, we're like, something's wrong. This is white and it's everything else is blue for the properties. That is trying to call our attention to, hey, we don't have that property right. So little context clues matter. I'm going to save that. I'll take a look. And it doesn't look much different. Hopefully it is applying those styles. Let's keep on going a little bit. So I would like my text color to be black. So I'll target my color as black. There's no border around this, right? And there's a giant border here. So I'm going to take my border and just say no border. And now I can start to see it's taken shape, right? I'm like, all right, we're getting better. Now it just looks like a white block in the middle of it. So let's try and make it a little heavier of a font weight. The default font weight is 400. And so 500 is a little bit more bold. We can use the word bold, and that will default it to, I believe, 700 font weight. Or we can use 100 all the way up until 900 to adjust font weight specifically. Oddly, you cannot use non-100 numbers, so you can't use 650. You have to use 600 or 700. No idea why they did it that way, but that's the way it's done. Okay, what else are we looking at here? That button is teeny tiny, right? And there's some nice breathing room going on here. So I'm going to start by saying, all right, I would like padding of 20 pixels around the whole thing. And I take a look at that and I'm like, no, just kidding. I don't want 20 pixels around the whole thing. I want 20 pixels on the left side and the right side, but not the top and bottom. I want a smaller value for that. Well, I could say padding left, 20 pixels, padding top, 5 pixels, padding right, 5 pixels. But there is a shorthand that we can use for padding margin, for padding and margin, and for sizing anything in the box model if it's going all the way around. The way that it works and the way that you remember it is the values go around in a clock. So the first value that you specify is always top. Then if you follow around a clock, the next value that you're going to hit is right, and then bottom, and then left. What do I mean by that? All right. The top value, I only want to be 5 pixels. The bottom value, or the top, I want to be 5. The right padding, I want to be 20. The bottom, I want to be 5. And the left padding, I want to be 20 again. So if I save that, you can now see my button is sized perfectly. So when we use that shorthand, it's always top, right, bottom, left. And if you remember it is going around the box in a clockwise manner, that is the shortcut that we can use. Nothing wrong with using padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left. That would do the same exact thing, but this is just accomplishing it all in one line of code. Okay, last thing we need to style this button, and then I will check in with you guys and see if you need a minute to catch up. I've got this lovely play icon here. And I'm like, wait a second. We've used icons before. We used icons up here. Those came from the Google icons. So I'm going to do a search for Google icons. I've got all of the icons down here, but I'm going to just do a search for play. You can take any one of these, whatever works best for you. I'll take this play arrow. And remember, we don't need to use the variable icon font. We want to use the static icon font. But we've already done this. We already took this this code and put it up in our head. It's already right here. Once we do it for one icon, it will work for all icons. That is not true for fonts, right? So I can't just put one font in and then when I go to use other fonts, just assume they're going to work. So the Google Fonts interface is going to build out one big link for me that will include all of those different fonts. But for icons, that one font, that one link tag is all we need for all of the icons on the site. So because of that, I can take this inserting the icon, go ahead and copy that code, come back down to my play button in the HTML, and I'm going to just paste in that span tag. So I'm going to save on that, come back to my Netflix, and yeah, well, there's a play button there, right? And I'm like, all right, let me think about this. If I went to my boss and said, I spent 3 hours to get that play button positioned perfectly, would my boss be more happy that I got the rest of the site done or spent 3 hours positioning that play icon? So I'm going to look at that and I'm going to go, it's not perfect. I want to fix that. We will fix it, but I'm going to finish out the rest of the site first. And then in my cleanup pass, I'll start trying to position those little tiny elements exactly where I want them to go. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to start a poll just to see where everyone is at. I'm hoping most of you are caught up, but I'll give you guys a couple minutes to catch up if you need it. Lots of new lines of code here, but hopefully they're all starting to click of, all right, that makes sense, or all right, yeah, that button was pretty ugly, but by taking little things like taking out the border or adjusting the background, we're really able to make that button our own and be able to style it the way that we would like. Oh, you know what? There's one other thing that I'm noticing. This still looks too much like a white little box to me. I want to add one more property there. Let's add a little border radius of maybe, if I spell radius right, of 10 pixels. Maybe a little too much. Let's try 5. There we go. That looks like a little bit more of a button, maybe a little bit more intentional.
So the word play is not supposed to be aligned with the button.
No, we're going to go back and fix that in our cleanup pass. It should look like this. And believe it or not, it is actually aligned, just not aligned the place that we want it to be. So it's actually aligned on the bottom of the triangle is aligned with the bottom of the word P. Which, again, isn't where we want it to be aligned, but it is technically aligned. All right, anyone need another minute? Okay. Thank you guys for voting. All right, moving on. We've got our more info coming up next. So that's what we're going to target. Again, as always, where do we want this? We want this in our button row. So what we are going to do is, because buttons are inline elements, what does an inline element mean? It means by default, their width does not take up 100%. So a button acts kind of like a span does, which is nice. We don't have to worry about columns. We don't have to worry about getting items positioned or floating them, which is an older way of positioning things in CSS. Instead, I can just make a new button. And we'll put in more info as the text of that button. I know I'm going to definitely want to style this, so I'm going to add an ID of more info. And then the other thing is I've got this nice eye showing up. So I'm going to head back to my Google Material Icons. I'm going to do a search for info, maybe, hopefully. Yep. Info comes up. Don't need any of this stuff because I've already got it all installed. I'm coming down to inserting the icon. I'm going to copy that code. I'm going to come back to my more info and paste that in. When I save, Prettier is going to work its magic, so that is good. I'm going to come over here and take a look, and my more info button is hideous. But I don't want to make it look just like the play button, because you can see in the final design, this one actually is meant to be like a two-tone kind of design, right? It's meant to be less important than that first play button. So we're going to style this one entirely separate from the play button. Even though there is some overlap there, it's significantly different or different enough that we'll just style it separately. So I'll come down to the bottom here. I'll target my more info. And then I'm looking at that and I'm like, all right, background gray is the most obvious thing for me. I also need the text to be white, so I'll say color white. The padding looks to be the same as the play button, so that I can just go ahead and steal that line. And it looks like there's a little bit of a border radius on that one as well. So I'll go ahead and apply that. Save, come over, take a look, and looks like I'm almost there. The last thing that I really hate is that black border around everything is making it look like it's going to pop off the page. I don't want any texture, right? I want it to look all flat. So I will say border none. And that gets us to where we want to be. Yes, more info is not aligned, but we'll go back and we'll fix that in a second. All right, we got our buttons in, feeling good about that. I'm going, all right, there's nothing going on over here. So now the last thing we need to do is this TVMA. And if we kind of shrink it down a little bit, we can see that refresh button as well. So that's meant to like replay the preview video. So this is what we have to work on. And I'm like, all right, where do I want that to be? Well, it's not going to be in this main column with all of the content inside of it. So I must need another column for that. So I'm going to go back to my HTML. I'm going to go all the way back up to where we made that column. And it's a col5 here. So if I click on that div, scroll all the way down, I see that this is the div that closes out the column. That must be that this is the div that closes out the row. So I'm going to put my cursor after that closing div and put another div in, class col. And I'm just going to put the word or the letters TVMA in there so I can actually see it. Then I come back over and I've got TVMA all the way up here. And I'm like, all right, whenever we work with the grid system, what do we do first? Do we do vertical or horizontal? Well, columns are working across horizontally. And so before we can get this into position vertically, until we can get that to drop down, before we do that, we need to make sure that horizontally, we've got the columns figured out. Well, this column, let's think about the size of it. This was a column 5. That must mean that this is a column 7 because it's taking up the rest of the space. But if I'm looking at the final design, I'm like, I don't want it to be a column 7 because getting it positioned down there is a pain. I want this to be empty. So what happens if we make this a column 5 that it already is? What happens if we make this another column 5? And that will leave us with a column 2 for the rating. What goes inside this column 5? Absolutely nothing. The entire goal of this column 5 is just to push this over so the column 2 is in the right spot. And that is totally allowed by Bootstrap. We are totally allowed to have empty columns. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to go into before our TVMA, we are going to make one more div class col 5, and we're going to put nothing in it. We're just going to leave it blank. Now, if I take a look at my code, TVMA is maybe hard to see because it's that white text, but it is positioned vertically, roughly where I want it to be. So if your TVMA is in the top right-ish corner, you've got it in the right spot. In order to get it there, we added not only the col of the TVMA, but we also added a col 5 that is empty. That col 5 is what we call a spacer column. All it is doing is pushing that rating over to the right. Okay, we're going to do a bunch of little steps here.
Mine is in the bottom left.
Check your col 5 and your col. Make sure they are inside of your div class row, but not inside your col 5. So I'll add some comments here. This is the end of row.
Oh, yes, sir. It's in my call 5. All right, let me fix that.
Amazing how all those little closing divs all end up mattering, huh? If you need help fixing that, let me know.
You said it has to be inside row.
Inside the row, outside the col 5. Because the basically the entire image is our row.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Mine disappeared. I've been trying to
Okay.
figure it out this whole time. but
Try and highlight the text in the top right. Is it there but hiding in the white of the image?
I like the text in the top right. I'm gonna share my screen.
Go for it.
That's where I have it.
Request
Mhm.
remote.
Oh, I have it outside of the button row.
Okay, so let's make sure. So our div class row is here. So that's in the right spot. But our col 5 is a spacer between this col 5 and this col. So we actually want this closing div is for your col 5 with all of the content in it. So we want to take this and move it out to here. And now if we take a look.
Oh, you gotta go left hand. I don't know why I keep doing that.
It is up here, and if we
Oh!
highlight it, we can see it.
My font was white. I was like, thank you.
Yep. You've got a little bit of styling on that more info button, but otherwise everything's looking good there.
Should I change it?
If you want.
It's supposed to look like.
Like these.
Oh. Sorry.
Hey, Max,
Yes.
my TVMA is on the bottom left as well.
Okay, so check to make sure that it's a div row. And then the only 3 things inside your div row, not counting all of the content inside the columns, is a col 5, another col 5, and then the col with the TVMA in it.
My
Okay.
my Oh, excuse me.
Mhm.
My I think prettier keeps adjusting it every time I try to put the div outside of the call 5 and into the row. Well, it's already in the row, but align it with row. It's not working.
Share screen.
Yes, sir.
As much as we would like to blame prettier is never wrong. So it's just trying to tell us, hey, something that we're trying to do in our code is.
Oh, I shared the wrong one. Let me see here.
Yep, just stop and reshare or switch it over, whatever is easier. Nope, still the same one. There we go. Okay. Let me request remote.
Yes, sir.
Be careful on your casing here because cols are always lowercase. And now we can figure out, all right, this div for the first col 5 closes here, which means this div is for the col 5, and this div is for the last column. So, believe it or not, it actually is in the right spot, and there is our TVMA. So your problem was that you had a capital C here. The indentation is right, though, because this closing div is the closing div for our row. So that means everything inside of that row gets indented one level, which it is.
Okay, just gotta make sure I'm paying attention. Gotcha.
Anyone else need help?
I think I do. The MA disappeared too, and I can't find where I'm missing something.
Okay, share your screen. Okay. Anything up here? Oh, okay. So you are actually in the right spot. If you just highlight the text in the top right of the sky, that TVMA is actually there. It's just in white.
Oh, okay.
Which
Okay.
mine is as well. If you shrink the image down a little bit, it becomes easier to see, and we'll fix that in a second.
Okay. So I have everything I should have right now.
Yep, your prettier is happy. It is in the right spot. You are good to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Anyone else? All right, we've got 8 minutes until break. Let's make the most of it. Positioning this is going to be the hardest thing that we have ever positioned. But the fact that it is white and that a couple of us have already missed it is a bigger problem, right? So instead of trying to get it positioned right before break, this is something that we have to learn as developers. There is only so much we can do in a day. And at the very beginning of the day and the very end of the day is probably when we are going to be the least productive. So understanding that there is another day tomorrow or that we're about to take a break, it's very important to prioritize. And so oftentimes when I'm in the middle of a project and 5:25 rolls around and I go, oh crap, I got to go get ready for class. Instead of dropping everything, I try to leave myself some notes, right? So what am I thinking now? I'm thinking, all right, we got 7 minutes to go before break. Instead of trying to tackle the alignment of that, which is going to be really hard, what if I instead tackle this basic styling? What if I just get the TVMA to show up in that black box? And if I can get it in the black box, then I can worry about the positioning, not tomorrow, but after the break. So that's what we're going to focus on. I'm going to say, all right, first of all, this column has two different things in it, right? It's got this refresh button that we've got to tackle, but it also has the rating. So because of that, I am going to put my rating into a span. So I can target just the rating without having to worry about that refresh button that I got to fix in a second. Then I'm going to style that span out. So I'm going to say, add an ID on that called rating. If I can type, my God, okay. In my CSS, I'm going to target my rating. And then I am going to start styling that out. So if I put a background on that of black and take a look, I'm like, all right, that is technically a background of black, but we've got some additional work to do on that. So I am going to say, hey, I need some padding. And you know what? This rating and these buttons kind of look similar. So what happens if I steal the padding off of my button and use it for my rating? So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now I've got some breathing room going on there. And I'm like, all right, that's looking good. Let me go back to my design. And my design has this white line on the side of it. And that's really just visually anchoring it, right? And I kind of like that. So I'm going to go, all right, I need to add a border, but only on the left of it. And 1 pixel is going to be a little too thin. So let's try 2 pixels solid white. So I save that. I come back over here. And now I've got my bar on the left side of it. And I'm like, all right, we said we're going to save alignment until after the break. After that, alignment includes getting this gap closed so it's over on the right. But if I look at my design, there's one last thing that seems a little off. This is actually transparent. And if we zoom in on that, we can actually see the image coming through the box. That's a very intentional design because whenever we work with black or white specifically, we don't, that calls a lot of attention to the element. So from a design wise, we often either use shades of black or white, or we use transparency. And that's what we're going to do here. In order to use transparency, we're going to use a new color system that we haven't seen before. Instead of just saying black, I'm actually going to take that word out, and I'm instead going to type in RGBA. And then I'm going to put in 2 parentheses. RGBA is red, green, blue, and A is for alpha. Alpha just means transparency, and that's measured as a percentage. So the color black is 0% red, 0% blue, and 0% green. So I'm going to say 0, 0, 0. And then I need to say what level of transparency do I want on that? I would like that to be 60% transparent, 60% alpha. So I save that, and now I get my TVMA that is a little see-through. Okay, before we go on break, I'm using every 3 minutes that I have. Go do attendance. The secret word tonight is actually an acronym. It is RGBA. Once you are done attendance, go on break, be back at 7:25. Secret word again is RGBA.
Question. My TVMA is at the bottom.
Okay, share screen. Let's do some div debugging.
Yes. Give me a second. Okay, so share. Desktop 2, desktop. I think it's this one.
I'm sorry, you said GBA?
RGBA. Red, green, blue, alpha.
I think it's this one. Is it? No, that's yours. Whoopsie.
Do you know
Sorry.
how much time I've spent looking at my own code, debugging it before I've realized that it's my code and not the students?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have two trying here. I'm gonna do this one. I'm just gonna do the screen. So
Yep.
so
Okay.
the one on the right is mine.
Okay. So let me request. And sometimes our comments shoot us in the foot because we think that this might be the end of the row. Oh, do you have a pop-up to open system settings?
Oh, yes. So I do the plus sign.
It should show zoom in that list, does it not?
Oh, it does. Sorry.
So just toggle that on and then
All right. And it's on now?
yep, I'm
Go
in.
ahead.
Okay. So let's actually confirm that. I'm going to click in your div that you have labeled as end of row, and then I'm going to come up and it is the end of the row. So that is good news. So we've got our col 5, but our col 5, if we click in that, should end here, which it does. What you are missing, though, is this col is meant to be our spacer col. So this is supposed to be a col 5 that is empty. So I'm going to leave a note in here that says empty spacer col 5. And then our rating is meant to be in its own div class col.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to take that closing div and throw that there. And Prettier is still unhappy with us. It's showing a warning. And we haven't gone over how to read this yet, but it says unexpected closing body, and it's closed by another tag. All right, let's see what's going on. Close of, I think you're missing maybe one more closing div. There we go. Now Prettier is happier with you. So this is the end of the row, and then this is the end of the container out here. Okay.
Okay.
Take a look at your browser, see if that did it.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
No problem.
Hey Max, mine is gone completely now, my TVMA.
Okay. Share your screen, let's see.
Okay.
You said 7:25 to come back?
Yes, 7:25 for break. Um, all right. Are you anti-Prettier?
Yes.
Okay. See that's why I asked. So that means that we have to fix our indentation manually because my eyes start crying blood when I don't see the indentation right. So let's do that. So we got our col 5. What's in the col 5? All of this is in the col 5, so that's got to go over one level. And then the button row is also in the col 5. That goes down to, I think, here. And then the button. Okay, so this div is closing out the button row. So that is indented right. And then this is the end, the actual end of the col 5. So we're going to bring those over so it lines up with the opening here. That means this comes over because it's still in the row. And that means this comes over because it's also in the row. This div closes out the col. That means we need a div out here that closes the row, and a div out here that closes the container. Now, take a look in your browser, see if that fixed it. Keep in mind that TVMA might be white, so it may be hard to see.
I still don't see anything.
Okay, can you bring your browser over to the code monitor so I can see it? You may need to restart the share with desktop 1 or 2.
Oh, okay. Stop sharing. Okay.
Okay, so I think it's actually up there. It's just in white text. So if I request remote, you can actually see it hiding up here. It's just the cloud is white and it's white text on it. So the
Oh,
only thing that you're missing right now is that background on it, and that should fix it and make it look the way you want it to.
okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Maybe I should download Prettier and give it another try again.
It is. I was very anti-prettier, and then I forget who it was, but someone told me like stick it out, just like get used to it, and once you're used to it, then form an opinion on it. And then I got used to it, and I'm like, damn it, now I can't write code without it. So, um, there's a reason I take until week 3 to introduce it. It's because learning how to do that indentation will help you find the missing closing divs. So it's a blessing and a curse, you know. I'm not going to force you to install it. Just something
Yeah.
to consider.
I'll give it another try, maybe for another 2 weeks. I'll rewatch the video from last class and re-download it again. Thank you, Max.
Sounds good. Anwar.
Yeah, for some odd reason, I'm having issues with all my files. I'm not sure if it's corrupted or what exactly this entails. When I'm looking at the tabs for both the index and style, it appears to be green and it has some sort of a U symbol to the right of it.
Share your screen. Let's take a look.
Sure thing. Here it is. This stuff right here, I'm not sure what that exactly
So
means.
that's normal. It's probably just the theme that you have installed or an extension that you have installed. But
Oh,
that is totally normal. The U just means that it's in a Git repository. And then I don't know where the 5 and the 3 are coming from. It's probably just the theme that you have installed.
And speaking of themes, how would I be able to mirror whatever themes I have on my terminal onto the
So
terminal of
we
this
won't
one
touch
right
the
here?
terminal for another 5 or 6 weeks. And when we do use the terminal, we'll use the terminal inside VS Code. We won't use the terminal inside the Mac OS.
Oh, that makes sense. All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okie doke. 7:25 for break. So we've made good progress. We've got our content in. We need to do one little styling piece, and then we get to teach my least favorite concept to teach in all of HTML and CSS, and that is Flexbox, which is how we are going to solve all of our alignment issues. So bear with me as we get through that. But the last thing that we need to throw in content-wise is this little refresh button. So let's go ahead and tackle that. As always, we start with our HTML placement. So we know that we want that to be to the left of the TVMA. So we need to be inside our call. And I am going to put I am going to go find that refresh icon. So I'm going to go to material symbols. I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top. I can close this info. I'm going to do a search for refresh. I get my little icon here, so I will click on that. I will scroll down to the inserting the icon, copy that code, come over here and paste that in. And then I will take a look at what that looks like. And it's kind of hard to see, but I do have that circle showing there. I need to style that a little bit more. So what I am going to do is say, hey, in my rating column, because there is only going to be one material symbols outlined in that entire column, I don't feel guilty targeting that. So because I'm saying, hey, target my rating column. So let me put in my rating col. And inside that rating col, go find the material symbols outlined. And once you have found that, I need to style that out. So I'm going to say, hey, let's throw a border on that of 2px solid white. And that shows up as a square by default. And I'm like, all right, I don't want a square. I want that rounded out. So I'm going to say border radius, and I'm going to make it some huge number, because if you make it a huge number, it will turn it into a complete circle. And I'm like, all right, that's looking good. The last problem that I have with it is that circle is right up against the actual symbol, right? So let's throw a little bit of padding on that. So let's say padding, let's try 5 pixels. So I save that, and just with those 3 CSS properties alone, I'm able to get my refresh button looking the way that I kind of want it to. Okay. Give me a second to catch up on that, and then we get to talk about Flexbox. So Flexbox is something that we can use CSS properties directly, or because Flexbox is so commonly used to align items, oftentimes we will use the properties that are built right into Bootstrap. So in order to research that, I am going to open up a new tab. I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. I'm going to go to read the docs. And then you can either scroll down on the left here to Flex, or up in the top search bar, do a search for Flex. And the first thing that comes up is going to be enable Flex behaviors. Flexbox is, again, think about flexing something around, right? So we can say, hey, flex this to the end, flex this to the beginning, flex this in the center, right? It's a way to say, based off of all the available items around it, here's how I want you to flex yourself into position. So in order to enable flex, we need to put a class on to what we are trying to flex around. And that class goes up on the parent. So we have 2 ways of using flex. We can use this regular, it's called dflex, and that is going to direct the children of that parent element to enable Flexbox. However, we don't want to use that one yet, because we want to use dinline flex instead. Well, how do we know that that's the one that we want to use? If we look at the items that we're trying to move around, they are both span tags. We know that span tags are inline elements, right? They're treated like text. They just go from the left to the right, and they only take up the space that the text takes up, compared to a block element, which is like a div element that takes up the full width. So up at the parent level of the col, we are going to enable the flex system by adding in D inline flex. That D, again, is for direction. Inline flex. So I save that, I come over and I look, and I'm like, ew, that does not look good. With Flexbox, oftentimes you need to make it worse before you can make it better. So we're going to work on a couple properties inside of our D inline flex. The first thing is that we want to align, give me 1 second, let me confirm this before I... So the first thing we want to do is go, all right, we don't want this column to take up the whole top space. We want to push that down so that the ratings are in the right spot. So what we're going to do is we're going to target our rating col, and we're going to say, hey, throw some margin on the top of it of 250 pixels. Now we're getting down, the rating is roughly looking like it's in the right spot. So I need to keep working here, right? I need to also say, hey, I would like this D inline flex. I would like the content of that centered. And so in order to do that, we are going to say align items center. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that's looking really good. How do we know what align item center does? Other than you go, all right, he's been doing this long enough. He knows that. That shouldn't be enough for you guys, right? You guys want to dig a layer deeper there and go, what does this do? I need to understand this. So if we go into Flex and scroll down here, there's stuff on direction. We didn't use direction yet. We don't need to worry about that. We get into justify content, and that isn't quite a line item center. This is about justifying. We'll come back to this one in a second. I keep on scrolling down, and now here is align items. And align items shows us all of these weird boxes, but one of them is align items center. And if we take a look at what align item center does, it shows us there are these 3 flex items. Just like in our code, we've got 2 flex items. We've got the refresh icon and the rating. And so what flex is doing is it's saying, take it and center it in the available space. Let's take a look at what that looks like in the inspect tab. So if I go into inspect here and hover over our column, you can get a better visual of what's actually happening here. That orange area up on the top, that's our margin top. So the flex isn't impacting that, right? That is happening outside. So that is shoving the entire box down. Now in the remaining space that that div can take up, it is finding the center point between the top of the box and the bottom of the box and aligning both of its items centered in that box. So that is why we have align item center, because the margin is pushing it down so it's not centering it from the very top and the very bottom. And then the align item center is doing that vertical alignment to push that rating to where we want it to be. Any questions on that? There is an optional homework assignment called Flexbox Froggy. I will show you that in a second if you have not seen it. That is a much better tool than me as a teacher teaching you Flexbox. And that's going to go through kind of positioning all of the items. So I will show you that before the end of class. Okay, so I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is looking a lot better than it did, right? It's roughly in the same position. But we've got one final problem we need to deal with, and it should be aligned to the right side of the screen. So in order to find that, I'm going to go back to my Bootstrap, and I'm looking at all of these examples, and none of these examples are helping me, right? This is about vertical alignment. But if I scroll back up here, I can see this justify content. And this is showing me kind of how it's looking right now, that all of the content is at the beginning of the column. I don't want it at the beginning of the column. I want it at the end of the column. I want it to look mostly like this. So because that's the second one, I come down here and I see, okay, we have to have D flex or D inline flex. We already did that. We already enabled Flexbox on this parent div. So I come in here and I go, all right, justify content end. That's what I need to add in order to get the 2 boxes to show up on the right. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to say justify content end. I go ahead and save that, and that is what allows me to get the content box to show up on the right. Now, a couple other things that we can do here to clean some things up. Let's make our let me think about this. The material symbols outlined, instead of a white border on that, let's try and go for gray instead. We'll also make that color gray. so we can see our refresh button a little bit better. And then we can also add a little margin on the right of that. Let's try 10 pixels to get it removed or detached from that rating. Let's try 15 on that. Okay, so you may be saying, why do I need Flexbox, right? Why don't I just do a margin on the top of that and call it a day? Well, as our columns shrink down here, we may get into a position where the margin changes at the top, and our flex is what is going to be dynamic enough to move that into the right spot. So our site here is leaning into responsive design, meaning that it is responsive to a lot of different screen sizes, but you may notice as we get a little too small here, it starts to get wonky. We will solve that in a second, because oftentimes when we are working with our first web pages, we aren't thinking about responsive, right? We're still learning HTML, which is asking a little bit too much to think about how responsive this is. And in fact, the Netflix homepage will not, or last time I checked, does not load in your web browser. They basically tell you, you know what? If you want to watch Netflix on your phone, go download our app. Our app is designed for mobile responsiveness, right? It's designed for smaller screens. So we're going to fix that in a second with a little warning message. But as long as you are at a decent screen size here, we should have our TVMA and our refresh button showing up in the right spot. So again, we did a couple things here. The D inline flex is saying, hey, we've got inline elements as children that we want to position with Flexbox. The align item center is what is centering the content between the top of the flex container and the bottom of the flex container, with the exception of the margin that's pushing everything down. And then finally, this justify content end is what is pushing that over to the right side of the column. Any questions on that? Okay. I'm going to show you Flexbox Froggy really quickly. If we head over to Canvas, you don't have to follow me on this, but I just want to show you. Under assignments, I really hate the show by date sort up here because it just shows things in a way that if you're not a date oriented person, if you're more of a categorized organizational kind of person, there are certain things in here like Flexbox Froggy that just get lost in the undated assignments. So instead, I like to change this to show by type. And once I'm in show by type, you can go down and see these optional assignments. I have this under week 4. I should probably move it up. But Flexbox Froggy is a really basic website that gives you 24 levels of being able to learn Flexbox using frogs and lily pads, right? So it tells you this justify content. We were just using that, right? Justify content shows you how that we can modify this frog to get it on the lily pad. So it shows you all the different properties, and then when you play around with it and say, hey, justify the content, the frog, to flex at the, let's say, center, we can see where the frog moves to. And we're like, all right, that makes sense. He's centered. So now if I flex the frog to the end, it shows up on the lily pad, right? And so Flexbox Froggy is 24 levels. The first 22 levels are really easy, and you're just putting all of the different properties together to figure out how to position everything. And then the last 2 levels are nearly impossible. So totally possible to solve them. Just a warning for you there. But if you're like, feel like you're just dipping your toe into the power of Flex with what we've done in the Netflix website, but you want to do a deeper dive on it, Flexbox Froggy is hands down the best way to learn it. Free Code Camp does have a Flex section, and you can also watch Bootstrap videos on Flex as well. So lots of different ways that you can brush up on your Flexbox skills. I am definitely the old man here screaming, get off my lawn. Flexbox is one of the things that I resisted learning for the longest time. And now that I am leaning into it, I have found the power of it. I still believe that the grid is the best way to lay out a website, and then Flex is a great way to position things within those grid elements. However, Flexbox is really, really powerful for things like nav bars and when you have big background images. So this is a skill where you don't absolutely have to go into this, but if you are leaning into front-end web design and you really like the flexibleness of layout, Flexbox Froggy and Flexbox as a whole can be a great skill. Anwar, you have a question?
Yeah, this is a bit out of context, but is there ever such a thing as nested Flexbox? And in this context, is there ever a need for it? Or would that be during later stages?
Yes, you can. So Flex is all related about the parent and the child, right? So
Mhm.
basically, what we did here is we turned on inline Flex at the parent level, which means all of the children inside of it are going to be impacted and laid out by that Flex. What
Mhm.
you could theoretically do is also add a div in here, don't follow me on this, with a class of D Flex. And now the items inside of here are impacted by Flex layout. So you can definitely nest your Flexbox and say, hey, these 3 items are positioned by this inline Flex, and then whatever items are in here are impacted by this parent's Flex, which is also impacted by its parent's D inline Flex up here. So it is entirely possible to flex a Flex. With the grid system, it is usually not required, but this is totally valid HTML. And as long as you can wrap your brain around flexing at the parent and child level, you can think about nesting the Flex just like we nested columns in the news website, right? So we had that 363 layout on the news website, but then in the latest column, we wanted to break that down in those rows into another 3 and 9, right? And so just the same way that we nested the grid system, we can nest Flex in that manner.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I definitely remember playing that little Flexbox thing before. I don't know where, but I remember again through the whole levels and stuff. But I'm gonna give it a try again, see if I can remember.
It is good to learn the individual properties. And I love Free Code Camp. So if you're like, this is too gamey for me, you can go over to Free Code Camp and they'll explain all the properties as well. Or if you're a YouTube person, just do a search for Flexbox and there will be plenty of videos there. I'm level probably 10 of 24 on Flexbox Froggy in terms of, no, it's not kidding. I'm kidding. I have finished it. I only use Flexbox as a last resort when I'm like, I can't position this the way I want it to. So I'm just gonna keep on trying different Flexbox properties until I get it into the right spot. But I am more of a backend and database developer than I am a front end developer. So if I were spending more time in front ends, I would invest more time into learning Flexbox. So just throwing it out there as a skill that you can level up, but one that is not absolutely required to become a full stack developer.
What is the D in D dash, whatever?
Direction.
Okay.
I don't know why. Oh, display. Sorry. Direct children elements into Flex items. So display Flex is the D. My bad, not direction. And the reason why it's display is because without this D inline Flex, what we would also be able to do is say like my Flex class. And then in here, don't follow me on this. We could say my Flex class display inline flex. And not only would that do the same thing and not change anything, but if we put it back to D inline flex and we inspect on that, we can actually see. Oh, I was hoping that would come up right there. If we scroll down in this enough, we should be able to see our D inline flex is just setting the display to inline flex. Try it this way. Yeah. So our D inline flex is literally just setting it to display inline flex, which is the class that we manually created. So it's just a shortcut that Bootstrap's pre-made that class for us.
Gotcha.
I know it's one of those things that it's like you either really get it or you really don't, but as you're working on your own projects, Flexbox is just another way to lay things out, just like the grid may be a new skill for you that you have learned to lay out your sites. All right, how are we feeling? All right, we're gonna do trying to think of what else we have to do. We have to do our cleanup pass to clean up alignment of our links, our icons, and our buttons here. Good news or bad news is that is also all fixed with Flex. So we'll see a little bit more practice there. We've got to make it so when our screen gets a little too small and things start getting wonky with the ratings and that kind of stuff, we're going to put up a message that goes, hey, your screen's a little too small or a little too big, and we're designed for the Goldilocks size, right? Which again, may seem like a cop-out, but that's actually what Netflix did for the longest of time, and they may still do, and say download our mobile app instead. So we still have to do that. And then the last thing we have to do is if we look at our final row, we've got some images to get loaded down in there. Okay, let's start with our cleanup pass because I think that that will be pretty satisfying. So if we look at our play button, we'll start there. That play button is a little too high and the play text is a little too low. And so Flexbox can actually help us out there. So we're going to go up to our play button. I'm going to grab this CSS down. I'm going to find my play button here. And the first thing I need to do is analyze it and say, are these block elements? Are they full width elements that I'm trying to position and lay out? Or are these text elements, inline elements that don't take up the full space? Because it's span and literally just the text, I know that they are inline elements. So I'm going to come up to the parent. The parent is a button that has both of those elements in it. So I'm going to add a class onto it and enable my Flexbox with D inline flex. And I save that, and all of a sudden, look at how my play button looks. What that inline flex did is it said, hey, you two elements, you span tag and you text inside of the button, you two are interrelated. So figure out how you're going to flex the space that's available and position yourselves correctly. And just like that, we get our play button on the right spot. Now we could play around with some other elements here, right? Don't follow me. You could justify content end, and nothing really changes. That's because this is taking up all of the available space available to it. So it can't flex it to the end or to the beginning. And if you're like, but what's this white area over there? Shouldn't it be going over to the end? Remember that padding and margin don't impact our flex, right? That padding is pushing out that white background. So the only content that is in there, it can't flex left or right. So I'm going to take that out. But we are able to fix our more info button with using that same exact class. So if I flex my more info with my little icon, I also get more info in line with my icon. So I'm feeling pretty good about those.
So we do the same thing with what we did in play into more info, right?
Yes. Okay. Now we've got our nav links up at the top, right? And so we're doing a cleaning pass. We're going to start at the top left, and I'm going, my logo's looking pretty fine. I'm all right with those. My links up here, let's look at that final version. My links look like they have this nice hover effect on them. The cursor changes, which I also want to emulate. And maybe spacing wise, maybe they're okay. Let's see if we can clean that up. So first I need to find what I'm targeting. So I'm going to go all the way up. I've got my links bar and they are all span tags. So instead of just throwing this willy-nilly in my CSS, I'm going to try and group it together, even though it doesn't impact the computer. So I'm going to go all the way up to the top, and here's my nav in my links bar span. And I'm like, all right, that's looking good. But I want to make it so that when I hover over a span inside the links bar, it changes. So I'm going to say links bar span, and then this is what we call a pseudo selector, PSEUDO. A pseudo selector is saying only apply this styling when the selector is in a specific state or meets this specific requirement, right? So it's a way that we can target browser behavior, and that hover is a browser behavior that it knows how to apply CSS to. So I can say, hey, change the color to gray when you hover over that span, and also make the cursor a pointer. So I save that, I come up, I hover over them, and that looks good, and I'm feeling all right about that. But this text almost looks a little too big compared to my logo. So maybe I shrink that down a little bit. I'll say font size. Oh, be careful where you're doing this. I don't want to do it in the hover. I want to do it to all the links. So I'm going to say font size, let's try 10. Too small. 12. Let's go 13. Okay, now that feels a little bit more in line for me. And when I come over and hover them, I get all the nice effects that I'm looking for. I'm going to pause there, and then we will do the message that's going to pop up when the screen gets a little too big or small. I'm going to get you started on getting your images to show up. That's where you guys are going to practice at the end of class. And while you guys are catching up on that, I'm going to give you a debrief of tomorrow, or a preview of tomorrow, I should say. Tomorrow we are going to change up class a bit. So instead of making you guys code along with me, the tables are going to turn and you get to make me code. So for your homework kind of to work in your back channel, your Slack back channel, throw out some ideas of a website that you would like to see me create off the cuff. That can be any common website, that could be Reddit, that could be YouTube, that could be a Google search results page, that could be you name it, and I will start there tomorrow. So kind of talk amongst yourselves, see what site you would like me to recreate. that gives you an idea of how I go about making a site without having any previous experience with it, right? All of the sites that I've made so far, I've made prior to class, I've made several times, and you get to see me going through it because I'm practice teaching it. However, I think it's really important for you guys to kind of see the thought process that I go through. So tomorrow's class is certainly not as well rehearsed as some of the other classes that we have done already, but it one gives you a break because you get to sit back, kick back, and kind of see it, how that process goes, but also will hopefully start to inspire you for thinking about building your own sites. So little different pace tomorrow. Some people love it, some people hate it. Don't worry, we only do this a couple times throughout the cohort, but we'll hopefully give you a little refreshing look into how we go about building a site from scratch when we don't have it as well rehearsed. And I don't really care what site it is. Don't tell me until 5:30 tomorrow. But talk amongst yourselves, kind of agree on what site you want to see, and we will take it from there. Can be almost any website except for a game or something explicit.
One question about the Netflix site.
Mhm.
So we have the cursor property set to pointer, but if you scroll between them, it's like a text selector.
Oh, that's annoying, isn't it? Yeah, we can fix that. I wonder if, I'm curious, what if we use padding instead of margin?
Is it because they're all linked together?
Oh, you know what? No, it's because if you take your cursor pointer out of the hover and put it up on the span. Nope. Well, let me try my padding idea. I would have to think about that one and get back to you on an answer. We could apply the cursor pointer to the entire links bar, but that will have repercussions of the area outside of those links also turning into a cursor. So what I would probably end up doing is putting a wrapper element in where I say target the entire links bar. No, yeah, target the links bar column in particular, and then do a cursor of pointer on that. And that, oh, because it flexes the whole width. Yeah, I'd have to think about how I would fix that. Yeah. Normally we wouldn't actually use span tags for those. We would use anchor tags, and anchor tags by default set the cursor to pointer for you. And so it would be less of a concern. I think it's just the browser seeing them as inline elements, and that's why it's changing the cursor in between on us.
Doesn't Bootstrap have its own like nav bar
It does, but
element?
you will spend more time styling it to look like Netflix's nav bar than you would be from creating it from scratch.
Right,
So
because it's all preset.
because it's all preset and pre-designed. However, we will definitely be exploring the Bootstrap nav. I don't, let me see if we do it in the portfolio site, which is our next one. Yeah, we do the Bootstrap nav in the portfolio site, so we'll get experience with that in the next project. Okay. So if anyone need help, everyone all caught up and good to go? Okay. So if you shrink down my Netflix page, you can see this message pops up and it goes, whoa, your screen's really big or really small. We aren't designing this to be responsive, so don't just try and expand out your window, right? This is pretty easy to do with some CSS. Before we can get to the CSS, though, we need to we need to create this content so it shows up somewhere. So what we are going to do is I'm going to go all the way down to the very end, and I'm going to get even outside of my container. So right before the closing body tag, I'm going to add a div, and I'm going to throw an ID on it because I know I'm going to need to target it in my CSS, and I'm going to say div ID screen size, and then I'll throw in a message that says, whoa, your screen is too big or too small. So I save that. Again, I'm all the way outside of my container right before my closing body tag. And as we would expect, it shows up and it says, whoa, your screen is too big or too small at the bottom. And I'm like, but it's not. This is in the right screen size. Of course, this is showing up. So I'm going to head over to my CSS and I'm going to say, hey, at the very bottom, target my screen size and set display to none. Okay, that made it disappear, which is good. It's what we wanted. But now we've got to write something that says, hey, if the screen size is beyond this size or below this size, we want that message to show up. We are able to accomplish that with what we call a media query. Media queries have gotten really popular because of responsive web design. Sometimes we want to change the size of what we're displaying based off of the size of the screen. We've already had a tiny little taste of responsiveness with the column system, right? Because in Bootstrap, we can specify column size based off of extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large displays. We're going to see that in the portfolio site. The next project that we do, we're going to get a little bit more practice with that. But for this project, we want to be able to write some CSS that says this only applies if the screen size is a certain width. So in order to do that, we say at media, the media of wherever our content is displaying, and we say only if the screen is between two of these things and two sizes. We say the max width is going to be 650 pixels. So if it's anything below 650 pixels, we want this styling to apply. Or if the min width is greater than 1400 pixels. So again, if the width gets above 1400 or below 650, what do we want to do? We want to target our screen size message and set the display to flex, if you spell display right. If that works, you should be able to shrink down your window and you'll see this message appears at the bottom. And if we shrink this back up to size, you will see the message disappears. Well, we're on the right track. We're going to take a break after this one and let you catch up. We're on the right track. The only problem that we have is now that that message is appearing, what else do we want to happen? We want the entire page to disappear except for that message. Well, we're able to do that by just targeting our container fluid. And we're saying, hey, only if these screen sizes are true, we want to display the container fluid as none. So now, with our CSS in here, we can display that message. And if we expand this back out, we get to see our content without that message displaying. I'm gonna pause there. We're gonna let you catch up for a second. I'm gonna start a poll just to make sure that we're all in a good spot. If you're feeling ambitious and would like to see some flex properties, this is totally optional. You can make this content be centered by saying something like justify content center. That's what makes it appear in the center left and right. We can say something like align items center. And this doesn't look like it does anything because that flex parent is not tall enough. So in order to make it tall enough, we can say, hey, make the height of this be based off of the entire screen. And that will center our text for us. Oh, and then we also need to text align center. And that will center it if it's wrapping onto multiple lines. Okay. Now I am truly done with this.
So would the reason that somebody would do this be because they can't go through and change each individual element or section in the layout to make it responsive?
It could be. It could also be that the software was never intended to be run in a web browser. So I did just check Netflix's site, and they do let you view it on mobile. But for a long time, Netflix said we don't want you to be streaming in a browser, because in the mobile app we have all kinds of control over the video player itself, right? So we can handle the resolution, we can have a better buffer, we can control the storage that's being used when you're playing a video, we can do subtitles, we can do all of that stuff we can do if you're using our app, but we can't do that in the mobile web browser because the browser doesn't give us control over all of it. And so for a while, it wasn't just a layout thing. It was Netflix was like, we just don't want you using our site in a mobile browser. And so they would put up a message like that that says, hey, this isn't designed for mobile experiences. Please go download our app. We do that at work. So the software that we use is intended to be used on a 16-inch monitor, right? And there's just no way to display all of the information on the screen on a mobile size screen. And so we display a message just like that that says, hey, either expand your window or jump on a computer with a bigger monitor, because our experience was purposely designed to have a lot of information on the screen. But yes, it could also be that you're working for a client and they're like, hey, my website looks terrible on mobile and I don't really care about that mobile looking experience. Can you just put up a message? Because I don't want you to touch my HTML. I don't want you to make my site responsive. That's going to cost way too much money. I just don't want it to look like crap. So I would rather it just display my name and my phone number if they're on mobile, and then if they're on desktop, display the whole site. Clients paying you to do that? Yeah, sure. This is a good approach. We do use app media queries for things outside of the grid. So you may display, you may choose that the play button disappears or the rating disappears if they're on a certain screen size. So you can use app media queries for that. You can choose that images may display a little differently. So maybe instead of this layout having it as a background image on mobile, we may want to make the image display as a thumbnail and have the text underneath it. We could accomplish that with a media query.
Is the app media targeting the browser's media player?
No, app media is you can use CSS for more than just a web browser, oddly. You can use app media queries to target what happens when you print the page. And so media is just saying what is the media that this HTML is getting rendered in. And then the min width and the max width are being fed in by the browser's window.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you can do app media queries for print. So if you've ever tried to print a web page and it looks really terrible, like recipe websites are someone who uses app media queries targeting printers to basically say hide these ads so that when you print the recipe, it looks right.
Could you also set media queries to be relative to the screen itself? For example, if it's smaller than the screen that it's displayed on, show it this way. But if it's the exact same size as the screen that it's displayed on, show it one way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you can do multiple media queries. So you can repeat this and say you could say like, oh, if it's between these two screen sizes, do this. But if it is at an even bigger screen size, like 1500, go back to displaying it. And that will, I don't know if I can actually get that big on mine. Let's see. So it's not displaying it. And then once we hit, that may be a cop out. Let's see. I'm surprised that didn't work. Anyway, you can do multiple app media queries. And if you wanted to, you could target something very specifically. So you could say something like only make this apply if the exact width was 600 pixels. So now if I shrink this down to 600 on the dot. Oh, I almost had it. You can see it displays the message. So this is just a CSS property. I don't know the full list of what you're allowed to use and not allowed to use in here, but you can get very specific with ranges and targeted screen sizes if you needed to. And this could be a good way to put in like a Easter egg into your code, right? If someone happens to have it at the exact right size, you could do something like that. But yes, this is pretty flexible in what you can target up here. Okay. This site is mostly done. You have squeezed all of the knowledge out of me that you need to. If you would like practice writing your own HTML in the next 15 minutes, you can try to get this row working down here. I need to check something. Yes. Okay. So you can try to get this working. If you take a look at your image folder, you will see that I have all of these shows loaded in here. Just be careful, they are not all .jpeg images. So if you find that show 6 all of a sudden isn't loading an image in, that's because it is a .webp extension, not a .jpeg extension. So I encourage you to use this time to practice with your rows and your columns. Do not forget about image fluid, because your images are going to come in too big for the columns, and image fluid is going to give you practicing your classes to get the image sizes right. If you were like, I'm so over the grid system, I have mastered it, and I'm ready for another challenge, use the next 13 minutes to practice with your Flexbox Froggy, because that is going to give you practice flexing things around. If you are like, I'm just so overmaxed and I can't take another minute of him, get out of here and I will see you tomorrow. However, do not forget in the back channel to start a discussion amongst yourselves of what site you would like me to attempt to recreate from scratch going in blind for tomorrow's class. I will stick around for the next 13 minutes, help you guys with any of the row problems in Netflix, work with you on Flexbox Froggy, even though I hate Flexbox, or to answer any other questions that pop up. Otherwise, have an awesome evening, and I will see you tomorrow.
I have an issue with my site. It's even when I adjust the length, well, the width of it, it still shows the message, this screen is too small or too big.
Share your screen.
Will do. Oh boy. Oh man, all these windows.
Okay, screen size, display flex, display none.
Oh wait, am I moving the mouse? My bad.
Nope, I got a request remote. Let me take a look at, so screen size. Ah, here's the problem. This needs to apply only when this media query is true.
Okay.
So if we take a look at your browser, now we've got a different problem, but if we go huge, it displays, and if we go small, it displays. The last problem is we don't want this to display if it's in the right size. And so
Yeah.
what we do there is we just say, hey, outside of the media query, so this should apply always unless this media query is true, take that screen size and display none.
Okay.
And that will make it disappear until we shrink it too small down, and you are good to go.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I thought when I saw you put the media, I guess when I scrolled down, I thought you got rid of it. My bad.
All good.
All right, so for this web page, as I see, it seems like we have to do a div, another div.
A div for there's a headline, and then there is another div that you need to do for the row with all of the images. And so,
yeah, so
think through the images of what they need to be in.
gotcha. So
Does it
they
matter
would.
if they're
Oh,
in
sorry.
a row, the headline's in a row, or if the headline's just in a div?
So you are not supposed to put any content inside of a row unless it is also in a column. So if you're going to put the headline in a row, you should also put it in a column, or you can just put it in a div that isn't a row and it will work the same way.
No, so it doesn't matter.
Correct.
As long as you have, like, you follow the grid, the rules of the grid. Okay.
Yep. You don't have to use all the images unless you're really looking for practice with the Netflix site. I will say that if you do use all the images, you'll have a better portfolio piece because it will look like you've actually created the entire Netflix website, but you do not have to use all of them.
How difficult is it to carousel?
Without JavaScript, very challenging.
Okay.
There is a carousel. Let me confirm that before I open my mouth.
Oh, an element?
There is a carousel element in Bootstrap. A word of warning, though, we've been skipping a step in the Bootstrap install with the script tag that we'll see in the portfolio. So if you are going to try and use the carousel element in Bootstrap, make sure you also have the script tag included, which is in the install documentation. It isn't in the carousel documentation itself.
Gotcha.
We've already done attendance. I will not be offended if you want to head out a little early, or if you're working on the images or Flexbox Froggy, or chatting about what challenge you want to present to me tomorrow. That is totally fine. I reserve the right to veto, but like I said, unless it's a game, that's the only thing I can think of that would not be as productive as you guys may anticipate.
Did you have a link to your finished product?
Yeah, I'll put it back in the chat.
Thank you.
Of course.
So, okay. So I did a div called class call. So that will be, and it is after the TVMA. That's what I did. Sorry, I have a lot of code to go through. So basically, what is this one? Sorry, I have so much. All right, it's at the end of row. So that row's done. So
I'm
I did a
gonna
div.
mute you.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Talking aloud is totally encouraged, but make sure you're on mute unless you need help.
No, I was saying like, so what I was gonna say is like, so the two divs is the one div is for the other shows, and then the other one was for the images, and this is all before the end div for end container, right?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Again, I was thinking like just like we did with buttons, they're like separate image, like not divs, but spans.
No, there'll be divs.
Okay.
Cols are almost always divs because we want them to be block elements, right? We want them to have a certain width to them. We don't want them to be influenced by we don't want their width to be influenced by the contents of them, which is when we would use a span for an inline element.
Should I put the image dot flex on, or the dot image dash flex on the parent div that they're in, or do I have to attach it to every image?
No, flex always applies at the parent level.
Okay.
Unless it has self in the name of it, which is kind of an exception, but 95% of the time you do it at the parent level. I hope you're aware you're taking the more challenging route to this.
Oh, should I just? Is it unnecessary when I have when I set the size of the columns?
The easiest is to do a row, a col for each image, and then image fluid on each one of the images.
Image, that's what I meant. I don't know why I said flex. So image fluid goes on
Image
each of the
fluid
images.
does need to be on every image because it's
Right,
applied at
okay.
the image level, at the child level, basically.
My mistake, I misspoke.
Okay, I was actually just about to ask that.
Yes, image fluid has to be on each one. So I thought you were being ambitious and trying to do this all with Flexbox and not use any column,
No,
which is entirely possible, but very, very challenging.
no. I just mixed the two up.
I got a question. So the released in the past year, the heading, and then the images underneath, are those two separate rows?
Yes, or at least two separate divs. The release in the past year doesn't actually have to be a row because the div will be the full width and it's the only item in it. So you can do released in the last year just as a regular div without having to put a row on it. But for the images, you definitely want to use a row.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey Max, quick question.
Shoot.
Awesome. Would you be able to quickly outline what it would take to make the website responsive? I don't know how many lines of code or how much adjusting it would require.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. There are certain things that we could take advantage of in the Bootstrap grid. And so the first step that we would probably want to do is take this back to a mock-up or wireframing step and say, all right, how do we lay this out? Right, because oftentimes when we jump into making it responsive, we finally get it responsive the way we want and we shrink the window down and then we're like, wow, this looks really ugly. I shouldn't have made it responsive like this. And so going back to the design phase is normally the right step. So if I take a look at the Netflix site, you can kind of see it without, you can see there's no hero image, right? So Netflix decided, hey, that entire thing, even if we do lay it out responsively, it just doesn't look right on a mobile display. And so once you get through the design of it, then you can start leaning into, hey, is it better to attack this with a media query, which hiding the entire hero image it probably is, right? But then when you get into the grid system, we wouldn't want to use at media queries. We would want to lean into the responsiveness built into the Bootstrap grid. So we would start doing things like, hey, it's a col-2 on a medium or large size screen, but it's a col-6 on a small size screen. And that's how we can start looking at this and going, well, there's no way I can fit 6 images across on my phone. But if I do a 6 and a 6, I can see both of them. And then maybe I need to think through the interactivity of being able to scroll left and right. And that scroll left and right is when we get into more advanced CSS to say, how do we handle an overflow, basically, so that we can scroll across them. So it is something that, depending on the design, oftentimes I'll get a design from my boss and he'll go, this is the way I want it to work. And I'll come back to him and be like, it's going to be a nightmare for me to get that button there. Instead of doing it this way, can I just make it scroll instead of you clicking an arrow button to have it scroll 2 icons over? And he'd be like, oh yeah, sure, I don't care. I can horizontal scroll. So there is a give and take between the design and the layout and the development team of, hey, I understand this is how you wanted the user experience, but can we modify that so it's easier for me to code it? But making a site responsive could be as small as a couple hours or could be as large as a 6-month project for the entire company, based off of how complicated the software is. And Netflix didn't avoid it because it was hard for them to get their homepage to look right. They avoided it because the whole point of Netflix is streaming, and there were technical limitations of making sure you got the best streaming experience once you started playing the movie. So I'm sure it was only a couple week project for Netflix to redesign their homepage to be mobile friendly. Once the technology caught up in the browser to make streaming work almost as well as the mobile app.
Awesome. Thanks for the insight. Awesome.
Yeah, and the only other thing I'll add to that is there's a ton of wiggle room that you run into when you start going to mobile. So think about the newer Androids and iPhones. They don't have a full bar at the top. They have what Apple calls the dynamic island, where they stick the camera. Well, now there are design implications of that, because what happens if your headline is centered at the top of a page? Now it's behind that black cutout circle, right? And so mobile responsiveness is now getting even harder. And then you get into, well, what if they turn their phone landscape? Does that still lay out quite the same way? So we will touch mobile responsiveness in the portfolio website, so that you can see how to address it with the grid system. But it's definitely something that adds in exponential complexity when you start thinking about implementing it at all the different design levels.
Makes sense.
I love questions like that, by the way, so keep on throwing them out there. It isn't just about learning what I'm prepared to teach. It's also about tapping my experience and asking questions that you didn't realize you wanted to ask, but now have the opportunity to. So continue for the whole class doing that. That's why I love teaching.
I did something where when you click the play button on the website, it brings you to the actual Netflix website.
Oh, nice. Little anchor tag in there.
Yeah. Just messing around with that, making it a little bit more interactive.
Nice. I like it. If you really want to get fancy, you can make the entire background video play as a video.
That's actually not hard at all.
Harder than you think. Well,
Like,
if you want the restart control to work, it's harder than you think.
okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But
All
no,
right.
that
Yeah. The
you are
restart.
right. Because CSS now supports background videos, it's not as challenging.
I probably end up going back in here a little bit later on, but what I want to do is the release in the past year section underneath. I want to add like a slideshow,
Mhm.
so that they all start to do that, because I had something in one of the original portfolio websites that I built myself a couple months back, where it kind of had some like some images, and as you scrolled, the images kind of like flattened and you can see them all going. I took that straight from W3 schools.
There's a limit to what you can accomplish interactivity wise without JavaScript, but that bar has been pushed much farther out with CSS3 and all of the interactivity with it. So, feel free to experiment with this. And the whole reason why we do these projects is so that you will have a portfolio site at the end of this that you can display all of that for. So always feel free to continue tinkering with projects after we're done with them in class.
Yeah. Yeah, that weather, it was very basic, but I want to make that one a little bit more like pull like an API for it and
So hold off
actually
on that, because that is a project we do in class.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. That's cool.
Yeah, there are a couple projects that we revisit. Portfolio site is one of them. We add in a database so that it can pull in the information dynamically on the projects. Weather is one that we do make interactive. We actually revisit weather 3 times. The first time that we just did, the second time we make a drop down so that without making an API call, it will update the information on the page. And then the third time is actually pulling in API data and making that display.
Cool. I will hold off.
Oh, and the fourth time is rebuilding it in React. Sorry. I really like the weather project. We keep coming back to that one.
I actually enjoy that one too because it implements every single kind of like extension or whatever you can think of. It kind of implements it.
Yeah, it's a really good starter, and it introduces you to the power of the grid, which I feel like is a very common thing for beginner HTML learners to struggle with layout. And I just wish that someone had introduced me to the grid earlier. So that is somewhat of a controversial curriculum choice that we make of, do you teach a grid or do you teach every CSS layout method? And so for the sake of time, we use the grid, but that is definitely a decision that I made as an educator of, how can we get you making functional websites as quickly as possible?
I think that's actually perfect because I've dabbled in HTML and CSS already. And one of the main things that I kept struggling with trying to self-learn was styling and kind of moving things around. And as soon as I started to see how Bootstrap kind of used the grid, it made it like 100 times easier. So now I'm going back in some old projects that I started and just moving things. I'm like, this is so easy. I don't understand how it was taken, why it took me so long.
That is exactly why I do it, but I cannot tell you the arguments I have gotten into with other developers who are like, you're showing them too many shortcuts. And I'm like, I can't make a website without the grid. So
It's way, yeah, I mean, the shortcuts is, I mean, yeah, it's nice to know the longer ways, but you're gonna start beating yourself up over it too much because there's a
yep.
lot of easier ways to do it.
Yep.
Right. Like how do you balance that as like a professional as like the industry keeps moving forward and there's like levels of abstraction on top of each other. Like, somebody 25 years ago was like, oh, you gotta know how the compiler works.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I mean I hit that point with Flexbox, right? Where like I was trying to make something at work and I knew Flexbox was the right answer, but I'm like, I don't want to learn this. Like I've gotten so far in my career, this is something new I don't want to learn. And I eventually I'm like, all right, this is like 300 lines of CSS that I am now hacking together, all because I don't want to learn 5 lines of Flexbox. So I need to break down and go learn that, right? So part of it is like they call it shiny object syndrome, where all you see is the next new thing and you're like, ooh, that's shiny. I want to go learn that. And so the way you counter that sometimes is by saying like, but what is this in comparison to? So instead of just learning something for the sake of learning it, I'm going to anchor it in something I already know and say, all right, Flexbox is another layout method. Why is Flexbox better? And what is it going to potentially replace? And once I know that, I have now anchored it in existing knowledge to make learning the new thing much easier. But the flip side of that is, yeah, I can't write a compiler. I I can't read binary.
Right.
Still have made a 6-figure salary because I haven't spent the time on that, because I said, what does the industry need? The industry needs more developers right now. And there's an entire rant that I will definitely save for another class on what's the difference between an engineer and a developer. And that's something that the industry uses as interchangeable terms. But
Mhm.
I have a very specific viewpoint on those two not being the same thing. So it's not to say that we don't need people who are experts at the computer science level, but I've specifically made our curriculum, and it's always been since day one, since before even I was involved in shaping it, has always been focused on development and not necessarily on engineering. Um,
Right.
as the majority of boot camps have also chosen to do. But yeah, it's always a balance of learning something new versus continuing to become an expert in the where you have experience. And I think at the end of the day, the best way to gauge that is job opportunities, right? if you're out there and you're applying to a ton of different jobs and they're all saying you need to learn AI, all right, I'm going to go on YouTube. I'm going to go find some guy I can learn from or some person I can learn from and go start learning about how AI impacts me as a developer. You know,
who usually leads that within like a company or an organization? Is there like a collective group or committee, I guess, that's like, hey, you know, Flexbox is really prevalent now, and I think it can help our workflow. We're gonna all, as a team, go learn this, or is it led to like the individual developer? Is it very informal?
um, yeah, it depends on the size of the decision. So one question that I get asked a lot is like, oh, if a company uses an older programming language like Java, why don't they switch to a newer one like Python or JavaScript if it's easier to write code in that? And the answer is your entire workforce is a Java workforce, right? Like you've invested thousands of hours into hiring Java developers. And so there can be a reluctance when you go to your development team, depending on the size of it, and say, hey, I think we should dump Java and go learn this new thing because, you know, change is always hard. And so some developers will be very easily convinced to go learn something new. Other developers will say, I'd rather quit and go find another job where I can write Java than, you know, change my programming language. But yeah, it depends. There are normally the way it happens is someone a little more open-minded will start looking at Flexbox and they'll say, hey, I'm going to go to Can I Use and I'm going to look at Flexbox and I'm going to see the percentage of users worldwide that are using a browser that supports Flexbox. So Flexbox came out 10 years ago and it had next to no browser support, and companies were like, no, you can't use Flexbox because it's going to look right on two of our user screens and wrong on the other 98%. But as time progressed, as more browsers got on board with it, a developer probably used it and another developer looked at their code and went, what's display flex? I've never flexed a display property before. What's this do? And then over time, it gathers not only at your company, but also industry wide. So all of a sudden, you'll see Free Code Camp has updated their curriculum to include Flex, or you'll start seeing in the release notes of Chrome, Chrome has now advertised that they're supporting Flex, or so it's normally a industry-wide movement as much as it is a company-wide movement, as much as it is an individual thing that you go out and learn. And then over time, it just gets to the point where you're like, well, this is a better way to do it. And because the industry is supporting it and all the tools that we use support it, it makes sense a lot to learn.
I see. So it's kind of like a positive feedback loop where there's like a lot of reluctance in the beginning and then it kind of like exponential growth.
Yes, yes. And that's specifically for web technologies. It happens a little differently for, right, because web is interesting because it's all an open standard, but at the end of the day, it boils down to basically 3 web browsers. And then you look at international use and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it depends on what the technology is. Changing server side programming language at a company is going to be very different than choosing to use a new CSS property. But like all technology, there's something called the user adoption curve, where it's a typical bell curve, and the first part of it's like the first the very early adopters, and then you get the early adopters, and then it goes all the way through to the laggards, and it basically is a breakdown that they've like scientifically proven that it's the rate at new technology and how it gets adopted. And so I think a lot of that plays into technology on the development side as much as it does to new products and that kind of stuff. All right, final call for questions. We're already 15 minutes over. I don't want to keep you guys.
Actually, I have a question from the Foxbox Froggy. Start in the level 15.
Let's see if I can help you. So it should be.
I don't really get the concept for the thing you say, the order property.
So the idea is that you can have your HTML not in order and then use Flexbox to align the items in a specific order that you would like. So the red is on the frog, so it should be order 1, right? Oh no, order is relative. So it's right now the red frog is 4 over, and we want to move it over 1, 2, 3 spots. So you're gonna do order -3. And that's what moves the red frog over to the red.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So if you think about the HTML is going to be like div class name frog, and there are 5 frogs, but then the 4th frog has the red class on it. So what we're doing is we're saying, even though the red frog is 4 divs down, we want to reorder that frog so he's at the start.
Why is not -4? Is it not -3?
Because it's relative to where it is now. So we want to move it over 3 spaces because he's in the 4th spot. So we want him to get to the 1st spot, and he's in the 4th spot. So
Okay, sure.
4 minus 1 is 3.
Okay. Good. Thanks.
Order isn't something that you use a lot in Flexbox, but it's kind of helpful when you're like, I'm not allowed to modify the HTML, but I still want it to display in this certain order, and that's when you can use that property.
I was just going to ask about that. It seems like bad practice to kind of write the HTML out of order and then not like wrong, but like
I'm
intentionally confusing.
There's probably been one time that I've actually needed to use order. And you can combine it with when you push everything to the end and then don't want an item to be at the end, you want it to be at the start of all of the items pushed over to the end. You use order, but it is not a property that you should feel the need to master.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for your insights tonight.
Of course. Hopefully you'll get more tomorrow in the design process. Looking forward to seeing what site you guys pick.
Oh, were we submitting this before I go?
No, just the practice thing. I don't think there's a homework assignment this week. Oh no, there will be one. There's kind of a pop quiz coming up.
Okay.
But you'll get more detail on that tomorrow or Thursday. Yeah, no need to submit Netflix. But definitely keep a copy of it because you'll need it for your portfolio.
All right.
All right. Have an awesome night, guys. See
Thank
you all
you.
tomorrow.
Bye bye.